A major earthquake has struck a region near the Iran-Pakistan border. The US Geological Survey says the quake measured 7.8. Iranian state television is reporting that at least 40 people have been killed. But there have been warnings from Iranian officials that the death toll could go much higher. The epicenter was in southeast Iran in an area of mountains and desert. The quake was felt as far away as New Delhi and Gulf cities of Dubai and Bahrain. Across the Gulf, high-rise buildings swayed and officials ordered evacuations. Well, let's talk with Pune Gaduse from BBC Persian Television and Jonathan Amos, our science correspondent. Thanks to you both. First of all, what do we know about the earthquake itself, Jonathan?
Well, we got the first reports at 10:44 GMT. The magnitude quoted by the US Geological Survey, as you said, Ross, was 7.8. Iran is one of those regions of the world, I'm afraid, which is prone to earthquakes. If you look at the tectonics in that region, you've got the Arabian tectonic plate moving into the Eurasian plate, and then you get compressional forces here, and that gives rise to earthquakes. We were talking about it being one of the worst for some years. Of course, worst is one of those words which you have to define. If you go back to 2003, you'll remember the Bam earthquake, where many thousands of people died. That was a much smaller earthquake in magnitude terms than this one. One of the things that determines how bad an earthquake is going to be the depth at which it happened. Some of the reports on that, some of the scientific reports, are somewhat contradictory at the moment. Initially, we got a report of about 10 kilometers depth, which is quite shallow. And then that was revised to be much deeper indeed. But, you know, with all of these situations, the local circumstances can determine what the impact is going to be. If you're in a very developed city where the buildings are built for this kind of thing, then the problems can be quite slim, not very big. But in an undeveloped area, as we saw with BAM, with its housing, which was you know, of sort of mud construction in many places, then you can get very bad effects, and this we're still waiting to see.
And just before we speak to Pune, when you talk about the depth, presumably the further down, the less impact?
The further down will help.
That will help.
Yeah,
okay.
will help.
Now, Pune, I was talking a little bit about the region of Iran that's been hit, but tell us more about it.
What we know is that the earthquake has happened between two smaller towns called Khosh and Saravon. This is in the lowest, most southern eastern corner of Iran. Khosh and Saravon are not really big cities themselves. One of them has 178,000 population, the other one 246,000 population. And the epicenter is about 60 kilometers from each of these towns. So it might be a good thing to imagine that this would probably be a very scattered or sparsely populated area. However, there have been reports of 40 deaths which have not been confirmed. Some Iranian news agencies have announced that. We've spoken to people who were in the hospital of Gosht, which is the small town closest to that area, and they've only spoken of 2 or 3 wounded people being delivered to the hospitals. But again, this is just the first hours. It happened almost an hour ago, and we still won't have anything close to correct statistics of what's going to happen later.
Jonathan was talking about the BAM earthquake. Has the way houses are built and offices are built changed since then?
Not really. The southeastern region of Iran, which is the Sistan and Baluchistan province, neighboring Afghanistan and Pakistan, is one of the least developed regions of Iran and one of the poorest. Population is not really dense, thankfully, but the buildings that are there, as he mentioned, are clay, they're mud, sometimes even tents or makeshift buildings like shanty towns. So it would be harmed really badly if it is happening in a very populated area. From what I've heard, the depth has been 15 kilometers. The epicenter has been 15 kilometers deep, or 18. Again, we have different statistics coming from the Iranian seismological agencies and the US Geological Survey with a little bit of difference, even about the magnitude of the earthquake, which is something reported in Iran as 7.5 and from the US as 7.8. but we still don't know exactly what the number of casualties would be.
And what's extraordinary is that people all around the region are getting in touch with the BBC telling us they've been affected. Let's just have a look at some pictures we've got from in Delhi. This is of people leaving the buildings. And Jonathan, I'm sure people are watching us now thinking, is it right to get out? And is there a point at which it's safe to get back in? Because presumably there will be aftershocks.
Well, yes. I mean, they're quite likely to be aftershocks. We often see that when we get a big earthquake. I mean, these are things that scientists, you know, are trying to understand. There's a rule of thumb that if you have an earthquake of a certain size, then you're likely to get an aftershock at least maybe sort of a magnitude lower than that. That might be the biggest aftershock that you could get. So in this case, it's 7.8. We might expect a 6 at some point in the next few hours, perhaps. It's very difficult to say here, and I don't want to spread an alarm at all. Just to go on these different numbers, this happens. There are different methods of calculating the energy release in an earthquake. It'll depend on where the seismometers are, the calculations, the specific calculations that have been used to work out the numbers, and these numbers will change over time.
Especially with the earthquake last week we had, exactly last Tuesday in Boucher, we had tremors happening throughout the 5 days afterwards. Some of them were almost as big as the original earthquake in terms of magnitude. And we will have aftershocks on this one as well. Interesting, we just spoke to a seismologist in Iran, and he said with a depth of 15 kilometers or anything close to that, the tremor would be felt within a radius of 400 kilometers.
But we should re-emphasise, the US Geological Society just spoke to George Alagar on GMT. They put it at 82 kilometres, but we'll see if that gets revised again. Jonathan, Pune, thank you very much indeed. I'll let you get back to BBC Persian and the BBC Science Unit. Well, let's switch now to our other lead story on